Shalom and welcome to The Crossover, joining Jews and Christians through their God. I'm Rosalie.
And I'm Mitch. And today we're going to unravel some of the confusion of Islam as we discuss the two houses of Islam.
Stay tuned.
For nearly 2,000 years, Jews and Christians have been divided. But now God is calling for the healing of past hurts and the comforting of His people. Discover how God is prophetically uniting Jews and Christians across the world today on The Crossover. Here is Mitch Jerome.
Welcome to our show, The Crossover. Today we have a very special guest. Avi Lipkin is here from Israel. Avi is a lecturer and author. He's a teacher to many of us on the show. And we're going to talk about the two houses of Islam. Avi, welcome back to The Crossover.
Pleasure as always.
Avi, educate us. Islam is not very well understood in America, and Sunni, Shiite. Just take us from the basics here.
Well, the founder of Islam, Muhammad, died in the year 632 AD. In other words, the founding of Islam is 622, and about 10 years later, Muhammad died. And the first three replacements, the caliphs, the word caliph in Hebrew khalif, or in Arabic khalif, means replacement. The first three caliphs are what are known as the founders or the fathers of the Sunnis. You had Abu Bakr, Uthman, and Omar. The fourth caliph, Ali, who was the first cousin of Muhammad, and married to the daughter of Muhammad, Fatima. Ali was the fourth caliph, and his plan was to replace the first three caliphs and their assistants with his own people. This is where the problem began.
So there was a breakdown from the start in their own house.
Exactly. And the question was, would it be the lieutenants following the Prophet and their people, or would it be the dynasty? Because Ali and Fatima were starting a dynasty. Okay. And Ali and Fatima had two sons, Hassan and Hussein, who were the grandsons of Muhammad, of the Prophet Muhammad. And when the followers of the first three caliphs decided to put an end to this replacement program of the fourth caliph, Ali, that's when the killing started, the killing of the immediate family of Muhammad. And indeed, Hassan and Hussein were beheaded by the Sunnis. In other words, the Sunnis beheaded the grandchildren of Muhammad.
Okay.
And they paraded around the streets of Baghdad with the heads of his grandsons on poles.
Okay.
Now, go to Baghdad today, and kind of that's what you see between the Sunnis killing the Sunnis, you know, the tribal groups fighting the Al-Qaeda, or Sunnis.
Okay.
You see this between the Shiites and the Shiites in Basra and in the south of Iraq, where different Shiite militias are fighting for control. And of course, the Shiites and the Sunnis are killing each other, beheading each other, chopping off arms and limbs. You know, it says in the Quran, chapter 5, verse 33, anyone who makes war against Allah and His Prophet Muhammad, we will kill, we will crucify, we will chop the arms and legs off, and we will banish from the earth. And this is a commandment holy to the Sunnis, and it's holy to the Shiites. And unfortunately, there has been this war over 13, almost 1,400 years. There is no forgiveness between the Sunnis and the Shiites.
But this is within their own camp, their own religion.
Right.
This is their way of solving
Right.
issues.
And you have to remember that...
Because that war was really against the pagan, the non-believer of Islam.
Right.
Isn't that what it was designed for?
Yes,
Not amongst
but
themselves.
as a result of the wars against the pagans and the Jews and the Christians, what was happening was the Muslims were conquering the earth. The Muslims had the best army at the time. And all of a sudden, as a result of all their conquests, they were receiving gold, silver, slaves, agricultural wealth, spices, and territories. And all of a sudden, there's a struggle now. Who's going to control all this wealth? And, you know, forgive me for drawing a parallel. It's kind of like the mafia. You know, the mafia, you have these families in the mafia that are fighting each other for control. But I believe that there will be some kind of a confrontation, military confrontation with Iran, that basically the whole world will deal with Iran. And one of the reasons, of course, is oil and economics, but another reason is the Shiites to this day, the Shiites of Iran, are threatening annihilation to the Sunni leaders of the Middle East. especially the Saudis. And I don't have to tell you, you know, and your viewers know what control Saudi Arabia has today in Washington and in the stock market and the U.S. economy. And so the Saudis are basically saying to the Americans, either you defend us from these Shiites, or we are not your allies anymore. We'll stop the oil and we'll stop the investments in Wall Street. So it's interesting that the war between the Shiites and the Sunnis is very important to the American people to know about these things.
So neither of them are a peaceful group?
Okay. The difference between the Sunnis and the Shiites, and again, even within the Sunnis, Osama bin Laden is a Sunni.
Okay.
And he is different than the official leadership of Saudi Arabia. The official leadership of Saudi Arabia does not want a physical confrontation with the West. The Saudi, the Kuwaiti...
Too much political interest?
No. Very simply, the Sunni approach towards, the mainline Sunni approach to the United States and the West is, hey, we're taking all these dollars, all these euros away from the Europeans and the Americans, and then we are reinvesting the money back in the economies of these countries. We're buying out their real estate, their banks, their companies, their corporations, the oil companies. And in the end, why should we destroy America?
It's an economic windfall for them.
Why should we destroy America if we can buy it out for the glory of Allah? Okay. But the Shiites have a different approach. What the Shiite world is saying is we will blow up the oil wells, we will deny the West the oil in order to create a collapse of the Western economy.
The Shiite is saying this.
Yes, and the Sunnis are saying no.
Yeah,
saying we will sell the oil, take the money, and then buy out the economy. Why destroy it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Either way, there's going to be a takeover in their eyes, is what I'm hearing, either economic or
military.
By military.
Right. The Islamic world is convinced, absolutely, that Allah has given them the oil resources for that purpose, to conquer the world. The question is, will it be military or will it be economic buyout?
Is there no forgiveness in Islam, like we know it in the Judeo-Christian?
Listen, there's a word in Arabic, sulha. You do have in Islam the sulha, but the problem is a sulha, like any agreement in Islam, is temporary. And there is a time when the truce is over. They also call it hudna, where agreements that are made are broken when it's convenient to break them.
Now, Avi, when you say this, is this just with extreme Islam, or can you generalize all of Islam? Is there a moderate Islam, or are you blanketing here?
Okay, I'm going to say something, of course, which might not be considered politically correct in many, many circles. But you see, Muhammad made an agreement with the tribe of Quraysh. The tribe of Quraysh was a pagan tribe that ruled over Mecca, over the Kaaba, that holy stone, the cubic stone in Mecca. Muhammad was becoming a very powerful force, but he was stalemated with the tribe of Quraysh. So he made an agreement with them for 10 years. After 2 years, he broke the agreement and he wiped out the tribe of Quraysh and he took power in Mecca. So the peace agreement is a temporary agreement. When Arafat signed the peace agreement with Israel, September 13th, 1993, on the White House lawn with Bill Clinton, Peres and Rabin, Arafat after that went to South Africa and he almost got lynched. And the Muslims in the mosque almost lynched him. He said, "What's the matter with you guys? Am I any different than Muhammad?" Muhammad made an agreement with the tribe of Quraysh, and he broke his agreement after 2 years. I'm going to make an agreement with the Israelis. I'm going to break the agreement. There is a word in Arabic called taqiyya. Taqiyya means, contrary to the Ten Commandments, where you're not allowed to bear false witness, taqiyya means you are allowed and you are actually commanded to lie to the infidel. For the glory of Allah. In other words, it's part of the art of war, the part of deception. So taqiyya is literally at the heart of Islam. If you tell the truth, it's a weakness. Here in the West, telling the truth is a virtue.
Yes.
In the West, forgiveness is a virtue. In Islam, it's a weakness. You don't forgive, you destroy the enemy. And
Taqiyya.
Taqiyya, yeah.
Avi, hold that. Let's come back. We're going to take a break here, and stay tuned. We'll be right back with Avi Lipkin.
We will be right back.
So does that mean witchcraft is accepted in Islam?
Very much, yeah. Okay. It's actually, the Quran is said to have been blessed by some demons who became Muslims.
Okay. So she goes to this witch.
She goes to her. And she says, my son was a Muslim and was a devout Muslim. And I want you to do something for him to bring him back to Islam. Now he went to Christians. Christians deceived him and I want him back in Christianity. Back in Islam. I was praying, and when she starts sending the spell on me, she looks at my mother with a straight face and says, "Your son is following a path which he will never forsake, and he will be victorious." And he will be victorious as long as he will be victorious as long as he walks in that path. And I hope to walk in that path all my life.
Yeah. What can you say? Powerful. So she spoke the truth as a witch. She couldn't even curse you.
I was reminded immediately of the verse in Romans 8. We are more than conquerors through Christ who loved us, and he is our victor.
You've got to finish one more part of this story, though, Abraham, your brother. When he heard, just briefly cover this, he heard what the witch pronounced.
He said, "I know you'll be victorious all your life, and nothing bad will prevail on you." And I hugged him. I said, "I've committed my life to this path all my life." And I have been a Christian for 20 years. Not for anything, but because I have known Christ and he is my victor. And that's the anthem of my life. If I were to have something on a grave written about me.
Welcome back to The Crossover.
Welcome back to The Crossover. And we're talking today with Avi Lipkin and the Two Houses of Islam. Avi, is there any chance of peace between Israel and the Palestinians in just a few minutes?
You know, the Jewish people are the people who have known peace the least in the last 3,000 years, 3,500 years. We're the people who want peace more than any other people on the face of the earth. And Israel has a proven track record of returning territories to Egypt 3 times for peace, giving land to Syria for peace, giving land to Jordan for peace. We've been giving and giving and giving, and it seems like war is closer and closer and closer. There can be no peace between an Islamic entity and the Jewish people. I don't know if you remember, but in 2000, then President Bill Clinton invited then Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat. And at that time, Clinton and Barak were in agreement to give everything to the Palestinians, the West Bank, Jerusalem.
Yeah, Jerusalem.
There were so many things that the Israeli people were hysterical. They couldn't believe it, that
Right.
Ehud Barak made these promises. And Arafat turned around and walked away from it.
Camp David.
At Camp David II. And 3 months later, September 2000, started Intifada II, which killed thousands of Israelis and Palestinians, innocent people, many of them. Because Arafat understood that if he signed any peace agreement with the Jews, he would be dead the next day. And that's the reason why the most recent example, the Annapolis conference that took place recently, that the Islamic world said very openly, very clearly, they will not sign any agreement with a Jewish state. Islam's plan is that the Holy Land, the land of Israel, must be returned to Islam.
Total domination.
And the Jews and the Christians not to be
separate state.
and the Jews and the Christians not to be there anymore.
Yeah. So compromise is not a word in their book. It's
like if you're swimming
They
at the
want it in
beach
total.
and you see the fin of a shark coming at you, and you have a few steaks, red juicy steaks in your hand, you just throw them at the shark. The shark is not going to eat them and let you go and say, have a good day. On the contrary, it's going to whet his appetite. Or if a python is wrapping itself up around you, crushing you and getting the air out of your lungs, and then the world is saying, oh, let him squeeze you a little more for peace. And you know what happens in the end? The python swallows you whole. This is the plan of Islam, to swallow Israel whole and to wipe out every Jew on the face of the earth. I have to tell you just one little quick testimony. My wife, Rachel, is a beautiful woman. She used to be a TV announcer. And she had an experience based on the Hadith. Hadith is a teaching in Islam. The Hadith teaches that on the day of judgment there'll be a final battle. And every last Jew on the face of the earth will be annihilated. Not just in Israel. The Islamic faith teaches every Jew must be annihilated. And there will be some Jews who temporarily evade death. They will hide behind rocks and trees. And on that day, Allah will give mouths to the rocks and trees. And they will call out, "O Muslim pursuers, there is a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him." So the point is, you have to ask the Muslim, is it true in the Hadith that the Jews will hide behind rocks and trees and that they will all be killed? The answer is yes. Is it true that Jesus Christ is an Arabic-speaking Muslim who's coming back a second time to wipe out all the Jews and Christians, the Jews on Saturday and the Christians on Sunday? The Muslims say yes, it's in the Hadith. Is it true in the Quran, chapter 5, verse 60, that Allah cursed those who betrayed him and converted them into monkeys and pigs, and that the monkeys and pigs are the Jews and the Christians? And if you don't know that, you can ask any 6-year-old Muslim school child who attends these Saudi madrasas here in America. So the Judeo-Christian West has a problem because the little kids in Islam are being trained these hateful teachings from day one.
They're being brainwashed. Avi, reconciliation, a word that doesn't seem to have a lot of water in Islam.
Let me first say one personal thing. I'm a Jew who was born in America, raised in America, and unfortunately mistaught about the Christians. And I moved to Israel hating Christians because I thought they hated me. And that was until I was 40 years old. And of course I hated the Catholics the most.
Okay.
Today I love the Catholics, I love the Protestants, I love all Christians, I love all Jews. I have always loved the Arabs. And when you go to synagogues, they'll always remind you that the Jews were allies with the Muslims in Spain in 1492. I've been in over 800 churches, all over the world. Europe, Canada, United States, Israel. And everywhere I go, I find Catholics going to Protestant churches, and I find Protestants going into Catholic churches. I find many families where there's intermarriage between Catholics and Protestants. And basically, the wars of Reformation are over. There were 300 years of wars of Reformation over very genuine theological issues.
Right.
Now, in Islam, it's been 1,300 years of mafia wars over who's going to control the turf. Is it going to be the Shiites who control the turf? Is it going to be the Sunnis who control the turf? Who's going to be the follower of Muhammad? And you know, when Saddam Hussein was hanged, I don't know if you remember this, but there was some Iraqi minister. They were all Shiites there. And the Iraqi minister held up his cell phone, and the cell phone showed
Camera.
Saddam with the camera and Saddam Hussein as he was being hanged.
Yeah.
Just before they dropped him, one of the hangmen said, "Blessed are those who bless the family of Muhammad, and cursed are those who curse the family of Muhammad." Remember, it was the Sunnis who beheaded the grandsons of the Prophet.
Yes.
You've all heard of Al Jazeera TV. Al Jazeera TV provides different types of interviews, and usually in the American media they say, well, Al Jazeera showed such and such today, but you don't get the raw feed in Arabic because nobody knows Arabic. Well, my wife knows Arabic, and her job is to monitor the full raw feed. And one day my wife came home sick to the stomach. She had to take a sedative to calm down. And what was the story? The Algerian military, okay, now remember, Algeria has no Hindus, no Buddhists, no Christians, no Jews, and no Shiites. Algeria is a country solely of Sunnis.
Okay.
And there's a civil war there over the last 10 years that has claimed the lives of over 200,000 Sunni Algerians.
Within the Sunnis, to the Sunnis.
It's one big family. And why? Because the military that controls the country is more secular, having been trained in the former Soviet Union. And the fanatic Muslims, the Salafists, won an election, and they were denied rule because the military was afraid, rightfully so, that Algeria would go the same way as Ayatollah Khomeini type Iran, the fanaticism of the fanatic Islamic regime.
Okay.
And that the military themselves would be killed. So the military cut them off at the pass, annulled the elections, and a civil war started. And so if you are an Algerian and you support the military and you support the government, you're an infidel, a heretic, and a traitor in the eyes of the fanatic Muslims. And so my wife saw this interview with a terrorist Salafist who was arrested by the Algerian military, and he describes how they wipe out a village, condemned, because the men serve in the military. Okay. So they wait for the men to go to work, and after the men are all gone, leaving the women, children, and elderly, they go in, and they rape the women, slit their throats, slit the throats of the children, slit the throats of the elderly, and then they go to their trucks and they pull out chainsaws and they saw off all the arms and legs. Because that's a holy commandment in the Quran, to saw off the arms and legs of those who fight Muhammad and the Prophet Muhammad and Allah. By the way, another important point, if you want to compare the Bible and the Quran, in the Bible, chapter 9 in Genesis, it says that anyone who sheds the blood of another human being will have his blood shed in turn, because all human beings are created in the image of God. In other words, if you kill a human being, that's a capital offense because you've killed God. And we all know that God hates the sword, because the sword has only one purpose, which is to kill human beings. And God says to the children of Israel, when they're in the desert 40 years, when you stop to make camp and you build an altar, do not use the sword, do not use iron implements, hatchets, because these are weapons of death. And you've defiled my altar. Remember King David. King David, everybody, Jews and Christians, love King David, but he was disqualified from building the temple. Because he was a man of the sword.
He had blood on his hands.
He had blood on his hands. What did Jesus say to Peter when Peter sliced off the ear of the Roman legionnaire who was coming to arrest Jesus? Jesus says, put the sword away. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword.
Correct.
What does it say in the Quran, chapter 2, verse 216? Slaughtering people with the sword is obligatory upon you. That's chapter 2, verse 216. And even though you might not like to slaughter people, and you might think it's a bad thing to slaughter people, but Allah knows that it's a good thing to slaughter people. And this is indeed what we see happening in the Islamic world, where Sunnis kill Sunnis, Shiites kill Shiites, and Sunnis and Shiites are killing each other, not only in Iraq, but in Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan.
So what do we in the West are supposed to do with this? I mean, how do we digest this? This is, how does this play out today, like Iran?
Let's go back to chapter 5, verse 33 of the Quran. Anyone who makes war on Allah and his Prophet Muhammad, we will kill, crucify, chop the arms and legs off, and banish from the earth. The Jews and Christians are making war with Allah. The Hindus and the Buddhists are making war with Allah. And for the Shiites, the Sunnis are making war on Allah. And for the Sunnis, the Shiites are making war on Allah. Which means basically every human being must die for Allah to be pleased.
You made reference to the one world government. Christians reading the Bible are familiar with the one world government to come. And you said here it's allied with the extremism of Islam.
Yes.
The one world government.
Right. And they are fueled by oil. Who has the oil? Not the Jews. Not the blacks in Africa, and not the Serbs in Europe. So the blacks in Africa, the Serbs in Europe, and the Jews of Israel are sacrificed for the greater good. The greater good is oil and economics. But again, those who watch your show, I would take it, are Christians. So, Jesus said you can either serve the Lord or serve Mammon. So those people who go into these globalist economic programs, and to do that and to succeed, to serve Islam, to serve oil, you've got to sacrifice the Jews, the Christians, and the blacks in Africa. So they serve Mammon, they don't serve the Lord.
Avi, the last minute that we have here, what would you like our viewers to hear, to understand, to maybe pull together for us here? Anything in particular?
Well, I've shared in the programs that we have done that the war with Iran is coming because of oil and economics. The war with Iran, I believe, is coming because the Sunnis are demanding action against the Shiites who want to wipe them out. But there's also something that concerns every Christian and every Jew. Messiah is a Jew from Israel who speaks Hebrew. Jews and Christians agree upon this. And the Messiah is coming or returning to Jerusalem, Israel. Mm-hmm. Islam wants to prove that Allahu Akbar, Allah is greater than the God of the Jews and the Christians, because it's not the same God. Theirs is the moon god. Mm-hmm. By the way, forbidden in Deuteronomy 17 to pray to the moon. They want to nuke Jerusalem. Iran wants to nuke Jerusalem to prove that their God is greater and that the Quran is the true book and not the Bible.
That would be the statement, yeah.
This is the final battle between God and Allah.
Well, we hope today's show was enlightening, definitely heavy, but really bringing history to a more modern point to help understand the two houses of Islam.
We will be right back.
I'm Jim Becca. I've been a journalism teacher for many years, and actually I wrote my first newspaper story in 1973. And I've seen the world change a whole lot in that time, covering a lot of different stories. But one thing that upsets me a little bit, and this is what I teach my students, is that truth can never be bested by falsehood in the public arena. But what happens when so much of what you see in the media is not the truth, and it's overbearingly, blatantly bad or anti-good? And that's why I was really concerned. That's why I think that the crossover can be a powerful instrument in reaching people, because it's actually proclaiming the truth, the positive side of a lot of different things, and reaching out to people.
For nearly 2,000 years, Jews and Christians have been divided. But now, God is calling for the healing of past hurts and the comforting of His people. Discover how God is prophetically uniting Jews and Christians across the world today on The Crossover. The Crossover exists to communicate to the Jewish community that there is a growing group of Christians who love them unconditionally. The focus of the Crossover program is to promote a greater understanding of the differences and similarities between Jewish and Christian customs, history, and theology, while encouraging a closer walk with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. As a second-generation Holocaust survivor, Rosalie's Jewish heritage includes parents who were protected from the Nazis by Christians. Yet for more than a decade, Mitch and Rosalie searched for meaning in life in the New Age movement. But after returning to their Judeo-Christian roots, they discovered God's purpose for their lives: to rebuild bridges between Christians and Jews. Now through TV, radio, the internet, speaking engagements, the healing room, and print and video resources, they are reuniting Jews and Christians in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Join Mitch and Rosalie as they tackle tough topics and welcome dynamic guests on The Crossover. Never forget.
The Nazis would rent entire trains from New York City. And here you have the train pulling in to Camp Siegfried.
Saluted.
It looks like Germany. You would not believe that this is America.
This is, if you didn't see the picture,
yeah,
you wouldn't believe it.
And right below it is the Nazi headquarters. That picture you're looking at now is the headquarters of the Nazis in America.
And Christians are also understanding their Hebraic roots. And I think that's what the Crossover is doing, is putting all of this together. And it's new and fresh to everyone.
Welcome back to The Crossover.
We hope today's show helped you understand the unfolding events in the Middle East by understanding better the history and the relationships.
For more information, you can contact Avi's website and get some educational materials from there. Thank you for joining us at The Crossover.
Shalom.
You've been watching The Crossover, joining Jews and Christians through our God. For more information on today's program and The Crossover, you can contact Mitch and Rosalie by following the information on your screen. The Crossover team welcomes your comments, prayers, and suggestions. Thank you again for watching The Crossover.